Are new Falcons quarterback Michael Penix and new Falcons offensive coordinator Zac Robinson made for each other?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, right? The mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, aka Mr. Drew, aka Sirius Black, aka the Jolly Green Giant, aka the Iron that sharpens the iron, aka Mr. AKA, and I've been covering the Falcons for far too long, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong in this illustrious podcast, and I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this podcast, and you make this podcast your first listen, your first watch, each and every day. And if you want to become an everydayer and be appreciated by yours truly, the oh so humble host of the Locked On Falcons podcast, all you got to do is subscribe, follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, we are rejoined, I guess you could say, by Derrik Klassen of Bleacher Report to talk more about Michael Penix. When we had Derrik on before the draft, I think it was like a week before the draft, we didn't really get in that deep into Michael Penix. Or some of the other quarterbacks. And so now we'll be able to take a deeper dive into Michael Penix, his fit in Atlanta, his strengths, his weaknesses, his development plan, all that and more. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation with Derrik Klassen of Bleacher Report right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another illustrious guest. He is Derrik Klassen, making his triumphant return to the podcast. We had him on before the draft to preview some of the quarterbacks that the Falcons may take on day 2 or day 3 of the draft. And of course, the Falcons decided, no, we're not going to do that. Let's get our guy, day 1, top 10 pick, Michael Penix. Derrik, what was your reaction when you saw the Falcons taking Michael Penix at 8? I got to ask the question to everybody that comes on the podcast for like the next 3 months.
I mean, I'll be honest. It was probably the most jarring quarterback pick I've seen since. I don't even know, because the other ones that come to mind are okay, Kenny Pickett was kind of crazy, but it was okay, Kenny Pickett is obviously going to start at quarterback for them, right? And that was also in the 20s. EJ Manuel for the Bills a decade ago, but okay, he was obviously going to start for them. Picking Penix at 8 when you just paid Kirk Cousins $1 billion 6 weeks ago, it was baffling to me. And like you said, I came on this show, a few weeks before the draft, and it was maybe they're looking at Michael Pratt, maybe Spencer Rattler in the 3rd round or something. And then to go up at 8, not even trading back or anything to get him. I mean, just the whole process of everything, it completely blew my mind. And it was funny too. I was talking to a friend who doesn't really do football work, but obviously, watches football and stuff. And 7 picks in, it was man, this draft is chalk. And he was like, when is it going to get fun? And I was like, maybe when a defender comes off the board. And 30 seconds later, the Falcons pick Michael Penix. And I was like, okay, never mind. This is where it gets crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I remember commenting, this is a chalk draft. We haven't gotten all the crazy trade ups. Quarterbacks didn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, like some people were predicting. And then, of course, the Falcons decided that we're going to throw a wrench in that. But when we talked last, you talked a little bit about how you like Spencer Rattler as a fit in this Falcons offense. And you didn't necessarily love Michael Penix's fit. And, now you have the floor to elaborate on why you didn't necessarily love Penix's fit in this sort of Rams McVay style offense that we expect to see under Zac Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, so there is an entire possibility that Robinson should change the offense to fit more what Penix does. But to me, the offense, when you look at what Matthew Stafford does, Matthew Stafford gets a lot of 5-step gun drop back. We're going to throw over the middle a lot. We're going to throw these deep over routes, dig routes, seam routes. That's kind of the basis of the offense. And then they let him operate a lot in empty and throw quick game as he has to. That to me is just not at all really where Michael Penix wins. Michael Penix wins more throwing slot fades, go balls. He can throw post routes off of play action and stuff like that. He is more of an outside the numbers type of quarterback, where this offense typically operates by being able to attack the middle of the field very well. And there were a couple of throws on film where Michael Penix could throw the middle of the field, and like he very obviously has the velocity to throw dig routes and stuff like that. But you just didn't really see that much. You didn't see that much volume of throws over the middle of the field, and you also just didn't see very much comfort, very much anticipation, very much touch over the middle of the field compared to some of the other quarterbacks in this class, and really compared to other quarterbacks that have operated in this offense, like even Jared Goff for some of his limitations, very good middle of the field thrower. And then obviously Matthew Stafford, very, very good middle of the field thrower. So Michael Penix to me, more like when I envision what Michael Penix would be good at, it's something more like the 2015 like Cardinals offense where they're throwing a lot of like those 12-yard outs, throwing a lot of go balls. Every now and then you're going to get posted on the field. Like it's more of a vertical, but outside the numbers passing offense, which to me is just not really at all what Zac Robinson, assuming he does some of the McVay stuff. It just doesn't seem like that's really what the offense is going to be. So to me, just kind of a bizarre fit.
Now, you mentioned that 2015 Cardinals team helmed by Carson Palmer and Bruce Arians. I know in your scouting report for Bleacher Report, you compared Penix to a discount Carson Palmer. Is that the gist of where that comparison comes from?
Yeah, pretty much. Because it's just like I feel like a lot of the throws that Penix is good at are a lot of like what the basis of like that 3-4 year stretch of Palmer in Arizona was. Where, like I said, it's a lot of throwing outside the numbers. It's a lot of throwing vertically. Palmer, I say discount because I think Palmer was much better in the quick game, and I think his timing was a little bit better. But in terms of some of the more aggressive, like I said, outside the number throws, Penix really matches up pretty well with Palmer in that regard. And then Palmer, dude, that dude could put some miles per hour on the ball. And if there's anything I know for a fact that Michael Penix can do, it's put a lot of velocity on the ball. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that comparison comes in. And then also, by that point in his career, Palmer wasn't the most mobile guy. He didn't always have the most flexible of arm slots. And I think you see that in Michael Penix as well, where like, obviously he ran well at his pro day, but on film, you just don't see a lot of mobility, especially outside the pocket. And then I think his arm slot flexibility is like not really up there with the Mahomeses, the Allens, the Lamars, that sort of thing. So that to me is more where I see Palmer, where he's like kind of just like a stock standard pocket passer.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up that arm slot thing because I know one of the comments that sort of emerged after the Falcons' apparent interest in Michael Penix, and one of the things I can't remember where I saw it quoted, but when they sort of did that private workout for him early in April, there was a comment from some of the people that were on hand that he had some of the I don't remember the exact words, but they were maybe comparing him a lot to Matthew Stafford in terms of that arm elasticity that you're sort of talking about. I don't quite see that on film with Penix. I see some of it. I think you're sort of talking about it, but in terms of like being, I think the quote was like, "This is the most we've seen close to Matt Stafford in a while," or something. And I'm just like, did you guys not scout Caleb Williams at all? Because like that's the same. Like if you want to say Penix is number 2 on that list, okay, sure, whatever. But like the idea of like, this is the closest to Matt Stafford, it was a little bizarre. So I'm just curious, what is your reaction to hearing that?
No, I remember seeing that report or whatever as well, and I thought it was crazy. Obviously Penix can throw the hell out of the ball, and like there are flashes where you see some of that elasticity. But it's more like within the pocket. You don't really see him like doing some of the jumping, like moving around weird angles type stuff that some of the best guys can do. That even Stafford can do, I think, at his very best. But to say like you haven't seen a thrower like Matt, like this since Matthew Stafford in a class that has Caleb Williams and Drake May, I just don't get it. It seems crazy. It seems a little hyperbole.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that the Falcons were not counting those guys. It's just like of the other quarterbacks in the draft. So that was a little bizarre to me when I saw that quote. I was like, okay, that's interesting. That doesn't necessarily give me a ton of confidence that the Falcons QB evaluating skills are top notch. But we'll just sort of assume that we're taking that quote out of context. So there's still more to come with Derrik Klassen talking about the strengths and weaknesses of Michael Penix's game, and the chances of those things changing, developing, the probability of him sitting on the bench for the next couple of years. So we'll get into all of that, guys, as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, it is playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball season is in full swing, and FanDuel is the place to go if you want to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. And you can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And of course, there are great bets for you over at FanDuel for the upcoming NFL season. You want to bet on the Falcons over under win total 9.5. You know, their Super Bowl odds 12th best plus 2,400. Raheem Morris being coach of the year, Kirk Cousins being MVP, all that and more. So what are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/locked on. Again, that's fanduel.com/locked on to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. For me, watching the film with Michael Penix, one of my biggest concerns is maybe the footwork and mechanics issues that I feel like a lot of what he's doing from a mechanic standpoint is he's not really generating power with his legs, and his platform is not always stable. That front leg is always kind of moving rather than stepping into throws. I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on that? My hope for Penix is now that he's going to probably have 2 years to sit the bench, that there'll be a better chance of the Falcons to maybe rework that than you traditionally would have if a quarterback was going to immediately sort of be pushed onto the field right away, and he just kind of revert back to the old muscle memory. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on Penix's mechanics? And do you feel like because of the sort of unique circumstances here in Atlanta where he may sit for 2+ years, they have a better chance than normal to maybe address some of those issues?
Yes, so I think with quarterback mechanics, you kind of have to break it up between upper body and lower body. Lower body to me is a lot more fixable, which is basically just footwork like that. Even look at a lot of the best quarterbacks in the league now, like Patrick Mahomes. His footwork problems coming out of Texas Tech were overstated, but they were there, and his footwork is a lot cleaner now. Josh Allen's footwork is some of the worst I've ever seen from a quarterback prospect, and his footwork is completely fine now. Lamar Jackson used to have a much narrower base than he does now. Like these are like footwork is very much something you can fix. And I think with Michael Penix, like you mentioned, sometimes he's not like stepping into throws, and he's very much willing to keep his feet back a little bit, which I think can be an issue, and is why I think he struggles with touch sometimes. That to me, I wonder if, you know, just because he's torn his ACL twice, I wonder if he's just a little bit hesitant to play a little bit more forward, and I wonder if that's the issue. But I do think, like you said, with him sitting probably at least 2 years on the bench, I think there is a chance that he can fix his footwork. I'm more worried about the upper body mechanics with him for two reasons. One, I said this before, he has like a very low arm slot. Like he's throwing almost sidearm to it, like it as about as close to sidearm as you can get. He's throwing like 3/4. That to me, those guys almost always struggle with touch. I think you even see this from Lamar Jackson. He's kind of the same way. Like he struggles with touch at times because he throws very similar to that. So that like changing arm slot is, I think, a lot trickier because that to me is more muscle memory. Like you throw how you throw. So that I'm a little bit scared about. And then the other thing with Penix, which I guess ties to his footwork a little bit, he's very much someone where when he throws, he drops a lot of his weight and like kind of rears back instead of, like you said, leaning into the throw and like, you know, kind of punching the ball out. I don't know if that's fixable because, again, I wonder how much of that goes back to like he's kind of trying to protect himself from hits after having 4 season-ending surgeries, which I totally get. It's just I wonder how much of that is really fixable. So I do think, you know, maybe some of his footwork mechanics can be fixed, but the upper body stuff with his arm slot, I'm going to guess that he just throws that way forever. Like at a certain point, you just throw how you throw.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's why I look at it. I'm like, yeah, the arm slot, the 3/4 sort of release. It's like, yeah, that probably is what it is, right? You know, Phillip Rivers is probably the most famous example of having an unorthodox, but the ball was consistently getting to where it needed to go. I think that's an issue with Penix, that the ball is not always consistently getting to where it needs to go. But I do feel like the footwork thing could mitigate or solve some of those issues. But, you know, talking about some of the biggest concerns that we have with Penix, let's flip the script and talk about some of the strengths. That if you're, you know, you already mentioned sort of the style of offense that you think he has. You know, is it just the arm strength that is sort of the thing that stands out? That's his superpower. When one of the things we try to do when we evaluate these quarterbacks is find out what's the thing that they're good at. How do they win? That sort of conversation. What is that for you when you look at Michael Penix?
Yeah, I mean, arm strength is the obvious one. I mean, he just throws the hell out of the ball. He can put velocity on it, and he could drop it 65 yards down the sideline if he wants to. I think that's going to be an obvious asset. Like, even if he's not the most consistently accurate guy to all three levels, just the fact that defenses have to cover every blade of grass is going to help the offense for sure. I think the other thing with Penix, and this kind of ties to his arm strength, he is just a naturally aggressive player. He is very, very willing to take his one-on-ones. He's very willing to throw into tight coverage. Obviously, that's going to lead you into some trouble now and then, but you just hope that he develops the rest of his game where like that aggressiveness is kind of you get more good out of it than you get bad out of it. And I think in general he does. Like I said earlier, I would like to see him show that a little bit more over the middle of the field. And again, maybe with 2 years sitting on the bench, that's something that he can get more comfortable with, especially within the context of this specific offense. But I think in general, he's an aggressive passer. And I think when you have a guy like Drake London, that's a very, very nice trait to have. Like, I remember for a while, people were like, oh, all Andy Dalton does is throw it up to AJ Green. And it's like, well, yeah, he's AJ Green. Like, throw him the ball. And Michael Penix is very much willing to do that. So I would always rather have quarterbacks who are aggressive and you have to like teach them how to hone it than guys who are like Gardner Minshew and like don't know how to push the ball. So those are probably my biggest strengths with Michael Penix. I will say too, even though I have some concerns about how he moves in the pocket, how he's able to move, when he needs to create outside the pocket, I do think he's very tough. Like he is willing to take hits and willing to, if he knows hell or high water, he needs to throw this post, he'll hang in there and throw the post. Like he's really not afraid to do that. And I do think if this offense is going to be, run the ball, play action, take these aggressive shots, you kind of have to have that do or die mentality in the pocket. And he does have that. So I do think he has certain aspects that could work well in the offense. It's just, again, I think some of the middle of the field work, I would like to see him over the, year or two that he has to sit, develop that. And if he can, they might have something. I do think like there is a possibility there.
Yeah. That's kind of my thing with Penix, where it's like, I look at him as is, kind of late first, early second round. So it feels like the top 10 pick is a little bit of a reach, but I think the Falcons have a unique scenario where they can sit this guy for 2 years. We work some things, including the mechanics, and the player that we may see from Michael Penix in say 2026 in an ideal world may be very different or very much better than the player that we see today. You think that's a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, I do think it's possible. I will say I'm probably less optimistic of it, mostly because of his age. And it's not like, older players can never get better. It's just that when you're looking at guys like Drake or Caleb or even JJ McCarthy, who are 20, 21 years old and have very obviously shown NFL ability at that point, after 1 or 2 years of starting in college, that to me is a lot more moldable than a guy who's played and started for 6 seasons. Like at a certain point, you've kind of already seen a lot and you've probably made a lot of the development that you can make. Obviously, when you get to the NFL, the coaching is different, the environment's different, and guys can get better. It's just that I think generally these older prospects, it's a little bit harder to teach them and like, make them into something new as opposed to some of these younger guys who are just way more athletic, way more talented.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I'm personally a little less concerned about the age than I probably normally would be, just because I think some of that is attributed to him just constantly getting hurt, as opposed to him, starting 40 games in his first 4 years and then deciding like I'm going to stay for 2 more years, and Jaden Daniels start like 60 some odd games or whatever.
Or although Bo Nix break the record.
Yeah, although I think Penix did start like 45 games, so it's not like he didn't play a lot. So we'll see on that. So let's talk a little bit more with Derrik Klassen about how we're going to design an offense around Michael Penix, especially looking at the wide receiver position and whether or not a player like Drake London is the sort of ideal fit for a wide receiver one with Michael Penix under center. Now, in these dark times for the Atlanta Falcons, you need your friends more now than ever. And bright times are ahead. You want to celebrate with your friends, just like you can celebrate and team up with your friends in Monopoly Go on time tournaments where you can work together, build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more prizes you can unlock, like unique stickers that you can trade with your friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces, hilarious emojis that you can use to taunt your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. There's nothing better than heisting your friend's vault and say, nanny, nanny, boo boo. I just got you in the Monopoly Go. There's something new and exciting every single day, constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko games. And there's, of course, new timed events that are going to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover with Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Talking a little bit about sort of his willingness to push it. I've been watching a lot of Penix film over the last couple of days. And it just, you see so often on his film when it's like he sees, oh, I got a one-on-one with Roma Dunze. Okay. Like, good luck stopping that. And do you see that type of, rapport that he could potentially build with Drake London down the road, where it's just like, if you're going to single that guy up, I'm going to throw it up and my guy's going to go and get it. And that's something that could easily translate with Penix in London here in Atlanta.
I think so. I really think people don't get how good Drake London is. I mean, I think people who listen to this show and are Atlanta Falcons fans probably get it. I think, to me, he's like borderline like top 10 receiver. Like, he is truly a special talent. That if you have a quarterback like Michael Penix, or even truthfully, like if Kirk is just as good as Kirk has been in Minnesota, I think we're very obviously going to see what Drake is capable of. So I do think with a quarterback like Penix, who, again, like you said, when he just gets his one-on-ones, is very willing to throw it. I think with London, it'll look a little bit different than it did at Washington, where it was like so many go balls, so many slot fades. Like, that to me is, London can do it, but he's more of like we're going to run a 12-yard stop route and just pin it on his chest. And I do think Michael Penix can do that. But that to me is more what I think it's going to look like. But I do think that's when Michael Penix gets to play, that's probably going to be his easiest mode of offense is, hey, where's Drake London? And does he have a free one-on-one?
Yeah. And on that note, if and when Michael Penix gets to play down the future, and, there may be a very different Falcons roster, especially at the wide receiver position than they currently, again, we're assuming Drake London's going to be here, but who else? Don't know. Darnell Mooney or Rondell Moore. But I'm curious, like, if you're sort of designing an offense around Michael Penix, is it those sort of big ball winners on the outside, the speed guys on the outside to sort of maximize the skill set that you talked about? Or, do you feel like Penix can make any type of receiver good like the high level quarterbacks can?
As he is now, I don't think Michael Penix can make every receiver good. Like, there are certain receivers who function more with like just being in the right spot at the right time, playing with really good like quickness over the short area, all that sort of stuff, being more like 1 to 10 yard area operating receivers. That's just not the style of player that Michael Penix makes good. Like a Cole Beasley or something would be half as effective with Michael Penix as he would be with like a Phillip Rivers or whatever. Just like, I'm just throwing out names, but like, that's kind of the type of receiver that I think Michael Penix is not going to get the most out of. I think with Michael Penix, you want, again, I'm going to bring up a Bruce Arians offense, but like the Brady Bucks, where you had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin's, who are just big, catch everything in their radius. That to me is the type of offense that I think you want to construct for Michael Penix. Obviously, they have one of those in Drake London. If Kyle Pitts can stay healthy, he's kind of one of those too, even though he's, kind of a tight end, kind of a receiver, whatever. So I think that to me is more the style of receiver that you want to get with Michael Penix as he is right now. Again, there's a chance that he develops and his timing is a little bit better. His short area accuracy is better. Maybe that could all happen. But like I said, as he is now, I think you want just big guys who he can throw the ball to and can catch everything in their radius.
Yeah. So, Derrik, I really appreciate your insight into Michael Penix. We didn't get a lot of time talking about him before just because it was like, oh, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So now we get this opportunity to dig deeper, and it's going to be interesting to see what type of player he develops into, if he changes and grows and adapts and all that stuff. My sort of impression of the draft is like, regardless of who you take, it's usually a bet that you're making from 3 years from now, as opposed to right away. And I think Michael Penix perfectly embodies that in the sense of like, we're probably not going to see him for at least 3 years. We'll see. But Derrik, again, I appreciate you joining me. Let the people know, what, now that the draft is over, what are you working on this summer? Where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Like you said, we didn't really get to talk about Michael Penix because it seemed like this was not on the table. But pretty fun to loop back to it. It is always fun talking about quarterbacks where, again, you had no idea that this is where they were going to end up. It makes for a very fun post draft conversation. But anyway, you guys can find me on Twitter at QBClass. Obviously, our Bleacher Reports like draft stuff is over, but I will be doing a little bit of writing there about the NFL, kind of tying back to some of the rookies over the summer. And then over at Reception Perception, I'm going to be charting basically every NFL quarterback, or at least the ones that are expected to start again next year. So it'll be, up to about 28 guys or something like that. So I've already started on that, and I think we'll start rolling out the profiles in a month or so. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
Okay. Are you going to do one for the Arizona Cardinals backup quarterback?
We'll see. If I have the time, I might. My heart wants to. I don't know if it's necessary.
I would just be personally curious to see what that charting looks like, having watched it for a full season, just to see where you sort of come down on that. But we'll see. But again, Derrik, really appreciate you joining me on today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, that is going to do it for us here on today's Locked On Falcons. Thanks for Derrik Klassen for joining. We've got another week of Michael Penix, content here on the podcast. Tomorrow, we should be joined by Matt Waldman of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, who had a very high grade on Michael Penix. He had him as his number 2 rated quarterback in this draft class, and we'll have some other guests further in the week that are also equally as high on Michael Penix. So you're getting the good, the bad, all the things in between is what we provide uniquely on this illustrious podcast. And we also provide, a look at the film, not on the podcast, but as part of being a Locked On Falcons insider at the link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. And this past Friday, I dropped a hour-long film breakdown of Michael Penix looking at 3 games from this past season. Earlier in January, I did an hour-long breakdown just looking at his performance in the national title game against Michigan. And what I'm going to do is that's not going to be solely exclusive for the Locked On Falcons insiders. I'll link to that January video in the description below and, give you guys a taste of, what the Locked On Falcons insiders have been getting for, several months now. And maybe that will compel some of you to, sign up and become illustrious insiders. Of course, when you sign up, you get a free, I stress, free 14-day trial. And so if you sign up today, you'll probably be able to not only get access to the most recent Michael Penix breakdown, but upcoming breakdowns for the next 2 draft picks that the Falcons took off the board. I know we haven't spent a lot of time on the pod talking about them, but you will get sort of a first look at my thoughts on Ruka Roro and Braylon Trice if you become a Locked On Falcons insider before we really dive deep on those guys on future podcasts. But you can try that out for 14 days for free. And then if you decide, hey, this is worthwhile, it's only $4.99 a month thereafter. So check that out. And not only do you get access to all these film analysis, you also get that one-on-one connection with me. You can ask questions, share your random thoughts, ideas, all that and more. So sign up if you're interested at the link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. But that's going to do it for us here on our first listen today. For your second listen, of course, check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. That's going to give you the biggest stories in all of sports across the globe. I'm sure, Kentucky Derby, baseball, NBA playoffs, all that is in store for you on Locked On Sports Today. And of course, for your other second listens, you can check out Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft, Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every